Welcome back, crafty cuties, and if you're new, I'm Jessica. If you want to see part 1 to this video, go ahead and that will be linked below. Go check that out so you can see how I created the base of the journal. But if you just want to see the corset binding or you're here for part 2, then welcome. Let's get into it. I'm going to go over the supplies real quick. You are going to need 3 pieces of paper. They are going to be your base papers, and this is where we're going to do all of our measuring on. These are going to be cut down to the same size of your front and back covers and your spine. So mine are about 5.5 inches by, boy, I forget already, about 7.5 inches. And then my spine is about 3.5 inches. It's a little less than what the spine is by about 7.5 inches. You're going to need some eyelets, crocodile, glue, a pen, and a ruler, and then you're going to need all the papers that you want for decorating your cover, because we will need to have our cover decorated before doing the corset binding as well. Now, I'm also going to link a video down below where I originally got this idea, and she has a tutorial on her channel. It's Bohemian Crafting. I've made one of these before, so I'm just going to go off of my memory, and of course I changed some things up. So we're going to start with that. I am starting by marking where I am going to put the eyelets. I like to do this on a base paper. Now this is going to be completely covered with our final decorated cover, but this is where I like to do all of my measuring. And you can choose how many eyelets you want. I'm going to go with 6, so you need 3 times the amount. So I have 3 piles here. I have 18 eyelets. You can definitely choose how many you want. So we're going to need 6. So we are going to want to evenly space out our 6 holes. And so what I did here, I have them marked down so you can clearly see. I went 1/4 inch in, and I just drew a line all the way down so it could be as straight as possible. And then I went, for my first hole, it's going to be 1 inch from the edge, and then another inch, and then another inch. And then I stop and I start from this side and I go 1 inch in, 1 inch, 1 inch. So I hope that makes sense. They're spaced 1 inch in between, except for the center part. It's a bigger space, but that doesn't matter. So hopefully that makes sense. We're gonna have our holes going 1/4 inch of the way in, and then spaced 1 inch away from the outside. So I can just take these measurements now and copy them over to my second piece, but for the spine, I'll just quickly go over this with you guys. I am also going to have the holes be about 1/4 inch in, so let's just do this rather than explaining. No, sorry, I'm going to do 1/2 inch in on the spine. So I'm just marking a hole where 1/2 inch is, and I'll bring you in quite a bit. I'm not the best at explaining, but you guys seem to figure it out. So down here, I'm also going to mark where 1/2 inch is. And I just do this so that I can have a better, let's see, why do I do this? Oh, so that it's a little bit evenly spaced. Not a little bit. I want it to be very evenly spaced. Okay, sorry guys. And then here, we're also going to go 1 inch in. So I'm just gonna flip this around. There's quicker ways to do this, I'm sure. This is just how I'm doing it. And then also 1/2 inch. Do I keep saying 1/4 inch? Sorry, we're doing 1/2 inch in on the spine. And then I'm just doing that. And then the holes are going to be exactly the same spacing as this page. So I can actually use this as my guide, and I can just go ahead and mark with my pen where the holes will be. And then we can actually take the crocodile and mark these holes. Okay, so my spine has the markings where I need to punch holes, and one of my covers does, but to make this easier, I'm just going to put both covers together. I'm going to go ahead and punch these holes. Now keep in mind, this is just the base page. We are covering this with our final cover pages, so we will need to punch again, but for me this is just kind of the easiest way to get everything lining up really well. So I'm just going to go through, and I'm using my Crocodile again. You could definitely use just a hole punch if that's what you have. My Crocodile is actually not working very well. It's not sharp, but anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and punch the correct size for the eyelets that I have. And I don't know what size they are off the top of my head, but I should have them linked below. I've been getting a lot of my supplies from online at Craft Stash, and I am an affiliate with them, so I'll have my links below, and you can always go to their website on your own if you want, but I highly recommend checking the shop out because it's a great place to get a ton of your craft supplies in all in one place. Okay, so my baby is watching me. Okay, so now we have these punched. And then I'm going to also punch these holes again just so that I have them ready to go for our, it's kind of like a template in a way, I guess. So I'm going to go ahead and punch these, and then we need to work on finalizing our cover pages. We are now switching to a voiceover, so hopefully it works good on my new computer. Here I am just looking at all of my different choices for decorating the cover of my journal, and these are the papers that I'm deciding between. So I'm gonna speed up the process where I decorate the cover because that's going to be different for every single person, and I kind of like to focus in on, you know, the base idea of these types of projects. So you can take it and it's not super complicated because it's like mixed in, showing you how I decorate and whatnot. I like to just, yeah, not spend too much time on the personalization, but I am going to show you how I decorated. Now, a lot of times when I am layering papers, I kind of just go back and forth for a bunch of time and I add things and take them away. So that's what I'm going to be doing here, and there is a lot going on with this cover, but I knew that since the inside was going to be a little bit more plain than usual, I really wanted the cover to be just as crazy as I wanted it to be. So that's how it started out. I used a lot less fabric than I normally do on my covers for this cover, and a lot more paper. I've really been into wanting to use paper for my projects. Well, I haven't actually been doing a ton of projects lately, but any of the craft videos I'm watching are all about like using up your paper pads. And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and go for it and just use mostly paper. So I love these 12 by 12 papers that come in paper pads that have a bunch of labels because you can do a lot with these labels. Now this one is going to have her name, or it's going to say like first birthday. I haven't decided, and I still haven't even wrote on it. I'm probably going to use some stickers. So I'm going to be sewing all of these pieces on, and again, I'm going to fast forward through that, and the rest of this video is going to be a voiceover, so I hope the quality is okay. I wanted to add this little cotton candy ephemera piece, but it was just like too much, so you'll see later on that I do use it, but not on the cover. So I'm just going ahead and I am sewing the first base paper for my cover decoration down to that base cover page that had the holes marked out. So I'm just sewing all the way around to start with. And then I take a second paper that I layer on, and I'm just going to sew this. I'm sewing it around the 3 sides so that the top is open because I wanted this to be a little pocket. I absolutely love having a pocket on the front of my journals. I think it's a perfect place to write the details about what your journal is about. And then I just made this little cluster that you saw me kind of put together, and I did add a little bit of ribbon. Was it, sorry, no, what was it? It's like crinkled, I forget, seam binding. There we go. I add a little bit of that because I knew I had a charm that I wanted to hang off of it. So I'm just sewing this around, and then I'm actually going to glue that on because I should have actually sewn it on the pocket before, but I forgot, so that's okay. It's okay because then I realized, oh, I wanted to add a button anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and sew this on by hand. And off camera, I actually added a little bit of glue onto this because I always do that with my buttons, because you just don't know, over time I know that things get, you know, hit and banged around, and so I always try to add some glue as well. Now I'm just marking. You do want to make sure that you know where the holes are when you're decorating your cover, because you don't want to end up putting eyelets around. So you can see that base piece that I just showed you is on the back, but it's a great way for me to look and see, you know, where are these holes and eyelets going to be, so that when I'm decorating I can be mindful of that. And that was really good for me to know, because when I'm placing this little cluster, I wanted to make sure that those eyelets weren't really going to go through any of the part of the carousel word. So I glued that on. I add a little tag there, and then you can see I added some seam binding to the tag. So now we're going to cover the rest of the pages. And here we go. Fast forward through time. Those were, so I have the spine covered, as you can see on the back. We still have the holes. And then I have the back cover. And I used that little cotton candy ephemera piece on the back cover. But now we can go ahead and punch the holes completely through our finished pieces. And again, this is something you can change around. If you would rather only cut those holes out one time, you can just mark on your base piece and then actually punch the holes when you're completely done with your cover and the decorating portion. You're going to need your seam binding and your eyelets now. We are getting into finishing up the actual binding part of this. And as you can see, this binding doesn't actually incorporate any part of the journal pages or anything. We're literally just binding the front cover to the spine and the back cover. I just sped through this, of course, because nothing to really see here. It's all repetitive. I'm just closing off those eyelets. So now we are into the big part of this. I'm not going to speed through any of this, because I want to make sure you understand what to do, and hopefully you can kind of look at what I'm doing and hear what I'm saying and figure it out. But now is the time to kind of place our pieces onto our cover, and we are going to be lacing our whatever ribbon you want to use. It really doesn't matter. We're going to be lacing this through our pieces here. So I use about 24 inches, and I had a little bit extra, so I literally just eyeball it. Now I'm trying to see how much space I'm going to have between the spine and the front cover. So you kind of want to place those on your actual cover, and I kind of bend it open so I can see, just kind of estimate how much space there is between those two pieces. I would say I had maybe half an inch or so. And now I'm going to keep that in mind, so I know kind of how far to keep the seam binding, like how much slack to give it. But now we're going to go ahead and lace these through the very top eyelets. So you can see we're going through the top to the back, and you're really going to be just lacing these up, I guess, kind of like a shoe or corset. So then you're going to cross these pieces. Now I'm using this little awl to just help me poke the seam binding through. And then we're gonna cross, I guess, so my camera kept dying, guys, so I apologize. It might cut in a few places, but I'm gonna show you over and over, so you're gonna get a good idea. So you're basically just crossing the ribbon or seam binding, and then you just poke it through the next eyelet to the opposite side, and then you're just gonna continue on all the way down. Now, I think I mentioned in the beginning that it really doesn't matter how many eyelets you choose to have, and you can decide if you want the ribbon to be tying on the top or bottom, so you know, you can switch that up as well. I like mine to be on the bottom, but I think it would be really pretty on top too. Last one, you're just going to cross those over again, push them through to the other side, and then I hold off on tying, or because I like to attach the back cover before adjusting like how much slack I'm going to have between the two pieces. Right now I'm just kind of guessing. I'm just kind of making it not too tight, so it's not really perfect. So I am kind of yeah, if you need to tie those just to keep them kind of out of the way, go ahead. But here we go. Now we're going to do the spine and the back cover. And we're doing just the same exact thing here. So starting at the top, and we're going to cross, go through the eyelets, and repeat. Another tip that I didn't do that you might want to do, you might want to add some glue before attaching your eyelets, because sometimes those can come up, but I didn't do that, so I probably would if I remembered. Okay, so now once you have those all laced up, you're gonna kind of just fuss around with it. You can tighten the seam binding up, you can loosen it up. You want to place it on top of your cover and just kind of play around with it. I kind of shut the book and I open it and I just try to get the spacing even all the way down and just right. You really just want to make sure that the back cover and front cover aren't like going into the spine area, if that makes sense. You want to make sure each piece is in their designated area. And I just play around with this for quite a while before I glue it down, because I want to make sure it's pretty darn good. So I'm using my Tombow Mono Aqua Glue, but I'm also using a little bit of the fabric tack glue. I really hate working with it, but it is a strong glue, and I really want to make sure that this is stuck down good. But for all over right now, I'm just going to use my Tombow, and I'm just going to move the sewing threads out of the way. I like those hanging down. You can cut yours off if you want. But you can see I'm using a pretty generous amount, and I just go in between the areas that have the eyelets. I'm not really adding any glue to the seam binding, and I'd really try not to, so that if you wanted to adjust your seam binding at all, then you can, because it's not really glued down. So then I add some of that fabric tack to the actual spine on the cover, and then I'm just going to carefully press these down. I'm making sure that all of the seam binding pieces that are hanging down and tied are just out of the way, and that they're not like getting tucked under as we glue it down. The reason I like both of these glues is because you do have a little bit of time to fuss and move things around, and that is really important to me. When I made my first book like this, I actually used hot glue, and it was kind of a bummer because I had to have it perfect the first time, and it was really hard. I'm using my what do you call this? Wow, guys. I'm using that thing right there to just press down and make sure everything is glued down and super ready to go. And we're going to move on to gluing the front cover down. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Just going to cover this in a generous amount of glue, and then again I use the fabric tack just kind of like lightly over the front cover, as you can see right here. So I just add an amount right there all the way down, just for some extra, I don't know, durability, I guess? Not really. I just want to make sure everything's stuck down for good. And then I carefully pull that over, and I want to make sure that everything is nice and tight. I don't want there to be a lot of slack in between, you know, the spine and the front cover. And so I tied mine pretty tight because I like the look of that, and I think that it's just gonna wear better over time. So I almost have to pull hard on that front cover to make sure that it's down well. Then we're going to do the same thing. That's the back cover right there. I just pull that over, same thing. And this is even a little bit tighter just because it's the very last piece. So I'm just pulling and making sure that that is in the right spot. And then now I'm just going to take some time and add glue to a few places, mostly just right along the edges. And so I just want to make sure that everything's glued down really, really well. Now I decided to go ahead and add a charm holder. These are the ring fasteners by Tim Holtz. This is the smaller one. I used to have the big ones in my shop, but I don't have any anymore. I wish I had a bigger one. But I'm just going to pull those prongs together. And then I'm going to, I poked the hole right in the middle at the top. I'm going to poke it through the spine. And sorry, I'm off camera for a second there, and then I just open up those prongs and we're good to go. Then I have a nice spot for a tassel or a charm. So here we go. Everything is nice and glued on. We have our gorgeous binding, corset binding. I love it. I love how it turned out, and I hope you guys will give it a try. If you guys are enjoying this series, please give this video a thumbs up. Stay tuned for part 3. We will start working on the pages inside the lap book. I'll see you guys later. Bye.